Okay, welcome to Critical Weight Theory. And today we're going to be looking at a special topic. Why do we so often assume the worst about people, even when we barely know them, or maybe don't know them at all? So, I'm kind of putting aside one of the obvious topics here, which is evil politicians. The people who are just plainly bad, like the powers that be. I'm not as much talking about those types as I proceed here with this episode's general topic. I want to emphasize that yes, sometimes assuming the worst about someone actually is valid if you do know about them. So let's make that clear right off the bat. So there's no confusion, so you're not getting all mixed up here. More broadly, we're talking about the topic, and there are reasons, deep wired in reasons, we assume the worst about people. There's a negativity bias. We're programmed to focus on danger, on flaws. It kept us alive once or twice, so it might be better to assume the rustling in the bushes is a predator than a breeze. You know what I mean? And these are also part of cognitive shortcuts. The brain is lazy, it wants fast answers. Someone misses a meeting or looks off, we jump to the belief that they're unreliable instead of asking why. You know, like if somebody looks, I don't know, like they're sweaty or dirty or something like that. You might just look like that because you were, doing kind of a dirty job outside. Maybe you were out for a run or a jog or something, and people assume that because I'm a pedestrian walking to work in the morning, that I might be some homeless drifter or something like that. And because I'm wearing not the cleanest clothing, they make assumptions about that too. So they might make this assumption or that about it, even though I'm just walking to work or walking home from work, and I might have a dirty job that I do, and my my clothing might be a little bit dusty or something like that, and people like to make assumptions about that and maybe put put such people as myself into a certain category when in fact it might be something that's relatively benign. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there is a confirmation bias too. If you suspect someone isn't stable or dependable, you'll notice everything that supports that story and ignore everything that doesn't support that story. And there's projection too. We push our fears onto others. If we've been burned, we expect to be burned again and act like the fire is already here. And there's a bit of cultural conditioning that goes into this. Society loves success, polished images, composure. Anything else gets tagged as failure, even if it's just someone having a hard day or, like I said, you know, I'll beat up on myself here. I don't always wear the nicest, fanciest clothing, so some people make assumptions about me based on that or whatever. It's or it's just like, if it back in the day, if you had long hair and you're a dude, like people might assume that you're a dreaded homosexual or something like that. As if that's some sort of crime to begin with. Well, I guess in some places it is, and there are certainly some forces here in America that want to make that recriminalized or what have you. But it could just be a case of me growing my hair out, not going to a barber or something like that. It's not always some ideological thing. It's just I let my hair grow out. Who cares about that? So obviously, I'm talking a little bit about myself here, but I think I'm a pretty good example of some of these things. And empathy will take some work. It takes time. In a rush, we don't ask, we just judge a lot of the time. And, it can have a human cost. So all of this builds up. You get misunderstandings, misalignments, the wrong person carrying the weight, the right person not stepping in. A lack of clarity becomes a full-blown crisis in certain situations, and people can end up pointing the finger at each other, and that can include the middle finger, instead of actually coming up with a solution to a problem that they might have actually caused because they were too busy being ideological about something or being stupid rather than going with some obvious fixes to a problem that again they may have actually caused themselves. And then when something breaks, maybe nobody knows who dropped the ball because maybe nobody knew who had it in the first place, you know? And it's not always short attention spans that are to blame either. It's it's a thing that can be ideological in basis. It can be partisan when it comes to politics, but there can even be, some partisanship in the workplace, people taking sides. Then again, it's not always about malicious intent. Often it's about unclear structure, unspoken expectations, and the illusion that someone else had it handled. It wasn't my responsibility. And the result could be delays, burnout, frustration, sometimes broken relationships, personal and professional, and sometimes pure catastrophe. So, what do we do with all this stuff that I'm talking about? First, we can own our part. If we've assumed too much or judged too fast, we can stop and check ourselves. And that's the beginning of maturity. And granted, I'm not always mature myself. So, I don't want to be accused of being a complete and total hypocrite here because I don't always try to be mature or whatever. So sometimes I leap to assumptions myself. So I guess I can point the finger at me too. And second, get real with communication, have clear roles for certain things, ask things clearly, have clear expectations, try to reduce the guessing games. Sometimes you have to spell things out for people because they don't know what you're talking about. And, we've all been in this sort of situation where we either had to play a guessing game or we just weren't clear enough ourselves and it led to some sort of problem. So sometimes you really do have to sort of dumb it down, if you know what I'm saying. And we can also build systems where speaking up isn't punished, a less authoritarian system where asking questions is encouraged. I, I kind of botched that sense. I was like questions, but no, where asking questions is encouraged, where it's safe to say, I don't know what's expected of me here. Could you give me a little bit more information on the basics of this job or what have you? And finally, we give each other the benefit of the doubt when genuinely merited, because belief is powerful, not just belief in a project or an outcome, but belief in people. So if you, again, where it is merited, give somebody that benefit of the doubt, they might take notice and they might actually, act, really care about what happens. It's called the self fulfilling prophecy, and it works both ways. Assume someone's unreliable, and your behavior may make them withdraw. Assume someone's capable and trustworthy, and they just might rise to that belief. Who knows? Sometimes it really does happen. Sometimes a person will do much better than you expected them to if you just create a little bit of confidence in them. And even in my personal life, there have been a few moments where some people stepped up to the plate to help me out in this way or that, and it was not the person I was expecting to do that. You know what I mean? and that can really kind of make you rethink of how you feel about a certain person if they're the ones who come to your rescue in some way. So, at the same time, sometimes it is true. Like I said, trust can be applied in the wrong person, and then things will fall apart in that way. So you got to be careful because some people are still incompetent, and you distrusted them for a reason. So I always try to think about what you're thinking. Are you distrusting this person based on the actual person and their history? Or are you maybe just being a bigot or something like that? Those kind of questions, they're significant. So this isn't just about workplaces or friendships, it's about how we move through the world. Every assumption is a fork in the road. Believe the worst instinctively or pause to seek the truth on more of a case by case basis. That's where growth happens and where empathy lives, I suppose you could say. And that's where better futures are built, not on assumptions, but on understanding. And if today's episode made you think or hit a nerve, feel free to share it, talk about it, don't keep it quiet. And remember, assumptions can build walls, but questions can open doors. Ooh. So until next time, stay curious, stay relatively kind, and take care.